Between August 31, 1888, and November 9, 1888, at least 5 prostitutes were brutally murdered and mutilated in the Whitechapel area of London, their bodies torn apart with a ferocity that would haunt the city for generations to come. These heinous crimes, committed by the infamous Jack the Ripper, would go down in history as some of the most gruesome and unsolved murders of all time. The first victim, Mary Ann Nichols, was found on the morning of August 31, 1888, her body lying in a pool of blood on Bucks Row, a narrow street in the heart of Whitechapel. The police were initially baffled by the crime scene, with no witnesses or suspects coming forward to shed light on the brutal murder. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Nichols was not the only victim of this serial killer. Just a few days later, on September 8, 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered on Hanbury Street, her throat cut and her abdomen mutilated in a similar manner to Nichols. The police were now dealing with a full-blown crisis, with panic spreading throughout the city as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The killer was not only targeting prostitutes, but was also taunting the police, leaving behind a trail of clues and cryptic messages that seemed to mock their efforts to catch him. The next victim, Elizabeth Stride, was found on September 30, 1888, her body lying in a yard on Berner Street. The police were now working around the clock to try and catch the killer, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. The public was becoming increasingly frustrated, with many demanding that the police do more to protect the citizens of Whitechapel. The pressure was mounting, and the police were struggling to keep up with the demands of the case. The investigation was becoming increasingly complex, with multiple suspects and theories emerging, but none of them seemed to lead to the killer. On the same night that Stride's body was found, another victim, Catherine Eddowes, was discovered on Mitre Square, her body similarly mutilated. The police were now faced with the very real possibility that they were dealing with a killer who was not only brutal, but also cunning and intelligent. The killer seemed to be always one step ahead of the police, leaving behind a series of cryptic clues and messages that only added to the confusion and fear that was gripping the city. The police were working tirelessly to decipher the clues, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found on November 9, 1888, her body mutilated beyond recognition in a rented room on Dorset Street. The police were now at a loss, with no leads and no suspects to speak of. The city was in a state of panic, with many believing that the killer would never be caught. The investigation was becoming increasingly desperate, with the police resorting to unconventional methods in an attempt to catch the killer. The public was on edge, with many fearing that they would be the next victim. As the years went by, the legend of Jack the Ripper only grew, with many theories emerging about the identity of the killer. Some believed that he was a member of the royal family, while others thought that he was a deranged doctor. But despite the many theories, the true identity of the killer remained a mystery. The case was a complex web of clues and suspects, with many twists and turns that kept the police and the public guessing. The killer's motives were unclear, and the police were left to wonder what drove him to commit such heinous crimes. The investigation into the Jack the Ripper murders was one of the most extensive and complex in history, with the police interviewing thousands of suspects and following up on countless leads. But despite their best efforts, the killer was never caught, and the case remains one of the most infamous unsolved murders of all time. The police were left to ponder what they could have done differently, and the public was left to wonder if the killer was still out there, waiting to strike again. The impact of the Jack the Ripper murders on the City of London was profound, with the crime sparking a wave of fear and panic that would last for generations. The city was forever changed by the brutal murders, with the legend of Jack the Ripper becoming a dark and haunting part of its history. The case also raised questions about the social and economic conditions of the time, with many pointing to the poverty and inequality that plagued the city as a contributing factor to the crimes. The case also had a profound impact on the police and the way they investigated crimes. The Jack the Ripper murders were one of the first cases to use forensic evidence, with the police collecting and analyzing clues such as fingerprints and footprints. The case also highlighted the need for more effective communication and cooperation between different police departments, with the police realizing that they needed to work together to catch the killer. In the end, the Jack the Ripper murders remain a dark and haunting part of history, reminder of the brutality and savagery that humans are capable of inflicting on each other. The case is a complex and intriguing mystery, with many questions still unanswered. The legend of Jack the Ripper continues to fascinate and terrify people to this day, with the case remaining one of the most infamous unsolved murders of all time. And as we look back on the brutal and senseless killings, we are left with a haunting question: what drove this killer to commit such atrocities, and will we ever truly know the truth behind the infamous Jack the Ripper? The answer, much like the killer himself, remains shrouded in mystery, leaving behind only a trail of blood and terror that will haunt us forever.